Welcome to Event Up, the place where people enthusiastic about events stay in the know on the latest trends within the events industry. Live, hybrid, and virtual experiences. From virtual events to conferences, award galas, and everything in between.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sara Rosas. I'm Director of Partnerships at IMG, and I'm co-host of this amazing Event Up podcast. I am just so excited today to welcome a guest whose work just blends strategic planning, creativity, and a true passion for building meaningful experiences. Joining us today is Ashley Erickson, Executive Experiential Strategist and owner at AC Experiential, most recently consulting for Starbucks. She is a very experienced strategist who partners with executive teams to strengthen experiential portfolios, connect them with the right talent and agency partners, and develop event roadmaps that align with company priorities. Thank you so much for coming and welcome to the show, Ashley.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. We're so grateful to have you. So to start us off, can you share with us a quick overview of your journey and how you got into experiential marketing? I feel like I asked this question and Amanda asks this question of most of our guests, and there's always a fun story of like, oh, I was doing this and then I saw that the experiential team had so much fun and I delved into it. So I was wondering, how did you get into this crazy world?
Yeah, of course. Well, I don't know that my story is all too wild, but it was one of those things where I was in a marketing role. I was leading marketing operations at Chipotle at the time, and the training team had previously been leading event experience. And through some transition and some folks leaving the organization, that pivoted to my team. And I really fell in love with creating experience, especially for the operators. And, you know, at that time, the events, we really only did one per year. And over the next 12 years, we were able to really augment that portfolio and create so many events within the organization that it justified creating an event role specifically. So I moved out of the marketing organization and began supporting events in a full-time capacity, just, the result of growth within that portfolio.
That's amazing. And how did you even tackle that, like transitioning from marketing into more of the event side? How do you create like a strategy around that?
Sure. Well, the events obviously had been a part of my role. And as we continued to build and grow what we needed to have for the organization at large, so across all departments, across internal and consumer facing, it just justified me heading to the exec team and asking for just a bit of reprieve from some of my other responsibilities if the events were going to continue to be dynamic and need someone with a sort of a full-time purview of those. And luckily I had really significant executive buy-in and was able to sort of parse off some of those marketing responsibilities to other team members within the organization, and then moved into an operator role in ops excellence, which is where then my role sat for a couple of years.
That's so interesting. And having buy-in is essential. Every time we talk to someone speaking about change or speaking about growth, it's really, really important to get buy-in. Of course, for that, marketers have to show value and have to show ROI and impact and what the why is. And that's so interesting that you were able to show that value in order to get the buy-in. So that's so interesting. And speaking more about like strategy, it's so interesting that you've been in the food industry and you've developed this amazing portfolio of projects. What would you say is like the most important element while creating an event experience, especially in this industry?
Specifically with food and beverage, which you're right, has been my bread and butter, not to use a terrible pun in the food industry, but I do think that a firm appreciation for your attendee set, providing an experience to operators versus to corporate employees are incredibly different things. We saw at Chipotle, for instance, a really significant amount of people who had never been on a plane before, who had never been to an event like this before. And so really removing roadblocks or challenges or concerns that folks that may be a bit under traveled may experience. And then also being able to do that with additional attendee sets in the corporate team, in the executive team that will also be in attendance, and how to sort of marry all of those things together in a really significant way, but absolutely keeping core attendee and the reason that you're at the program as in the forefront of your mind as you plan is the most important thing, in my opinion, especially in food and beverage.
Absolutely. And then I love what you said about like marrying the experience, but also like setting really clear goals and boundaries. What do we want to accomplish in each event? I feel like that's very interesting. And we also have that in mind anytime we plan an event, any event really, but especially when it's just we are in the people business, right? And making sure that people have a good experience, but then also your shareholders have a good experience in terms of the results, and then touching all of our KPIs. I think that's so insightful. And you and I were talking in the pre-interview about how we read everywhere that the game has changed and now you have to prove ROI, and now, budgets are different and expectations are different. Yeah, but how, right? So I wanted to touch into your expertise for this. What would you say is like the biggest gap or area of opportunity for brands today while creating meaningful experiences, whether it's events or it's experiential marketing, activations, etc.?
Sure. I think there's a few things, probably three things I would prioritize most when it comes to gaps that I see regularly with a number of my clients across my portfolio that I'm now working with. Number one, a dedicated leader over experiential. I think oftentimes experiential marketing gets forgotten about or assumed that someone can pick up that ball and run with it down the road. And that is not the case anymore, especially if you're doing meetings on a regular cadence. You need those industry relationships. You need someone that's dedicated to that on a regular basis, not, an executive assistant that gets this thrown on their desk without any, real training or understanding of how the industry works. And so that would be number one. I also think that creating a team with a dedicated events leader and a true experiential professional is also allows you as an organization to operate with maybe a smaller team because you do have a strong leader who understands the industry. So really being able to also then bring in internal events and consumer facing events. Can those two things be brought together under one umbrella so that the experience you're providing to your internal employees isn't massively skewed from potentially what you've created for consumers? Nothing is more disappointing than being an in-house or, or rather a person within an organization who sees an experience at Coachella that your company has done for customers that well exceeds the experience that then you're given on site at your internal meetings. So that dedicated events leader, massively important. Probably number two is time. Again, I think this is often forgot. It's imperative that you are forward thinking and not 6 months, not even a year in most cases. When you are a brand of significant size and, trying to execute significant trainings and things like that, you need a heck of a roadmap. And so I always recommend the as far out as you can possibly plan, you should be for these sorts of things. And then probably third and potentially most important is organizational commitment. So a real belief in what experiential can do at the C-suite level and true commitment and dedication to that earmarked budget. I think oftentimes what we're seeing, especially in this sort of macroeconomic environment where things are a little, uncertain and some folks are struggling or some businesses are struggling. I think it's so important to have that organizational alignment that these events are happening. They are imperative to the organization and this money is earmarked. It can't be pivoted as a result of, needing to show a different financial situation on the bottom line at the end of the year. So that true commitment at the C-suite level is probably the most important thing when it comes to experiential marketing, in my opinion.
That resonates so highly with me because I have this conversation with our clients constantly. And I always ask them, like, do you know why there's more ad spend in your budget than event spend? And they're like, well, I'm guessing this or this because this or that. And I say, no, there's just one reason. The reason is because ad spend, like media ad spend, you can get specific metrics and you get the exact numbers of impressions, of how many people you touched, and then year-on-year sales. So it's literally because it's easier to prove ROI with ad spend. But actually, events and experiential marketing have a higher impact on sales, have a higher impact on brand recognition, have a higher impact on any metric really. Events and in-person experiences have a higher impact. So if we were to really want to increase those numbers, we would need to be looking at events. But as a partner, and I'm sure that you do this as well with your consulting firm, is how do we prove that ROI so that we continue to have that trust and belief from the C-suite to continue these campaigns and to continue to prove value and enhance our armor, right? Our marketing budget and all of our toolkit. So that really resonates with me. I'm like, yes, thank you for saying that.
No, certainly. That all makes great sense. And I think it is on the onus of the event professional, right? You have to be able to justify your spend and justify your request for increase. And so having a list of things in your toolkit that you can prove from previous year. Is it employee retention? How did that change? Is it employee sentiment? I love when organizations that I'm working with do a pulse survey, maybe let's say the beginning of the year. How are you feeling? Do you believe in the executive team? Do you believe in the values and the mission of the organization? How do you feel in your role? Do you have the tools you need to be successful? Really, again, back to needing to have an experiential leader. An experiential leader is in those conversations given to them on a plate later. You should be a part of valuable conversations within your organization. So I'm always a really big fan of when organizations that I'm working with to do a pulse survey in advance of a program so we can get an understanding of how are you feeling about your job? How are you feeling about the organization? Are you aligned with the priorities that we have as a company? And then post-conference, can we redo those questions as a component of the event survey to get an understanding of what we were able to change or, if things have stayed the same, if they've improved. So obviously employee sentiment, employee retention, are we, maintaining our workforce? We know how expensive it is to lose employees. Again, my experience in food and beverage, we see that a lot. So we generally see a significant increase on employee retention following a program or leading up to a program. And so I always remind organizations that utilizing experiential marketing within your calendar of when you start to see shifts in the way that people are feeling in an organization, maybe they bonus in January and they're kind of forgetting that bonus come April and when things are tough in a busy summer season. And so do we send them a save the date in April? Do we send them a meeting invitation in June so that we're sort of extending the runway of the impact that a meeting or an internal event can have with your employees, both long in advance and hopefully post-program as well?
That is so interesting. And I can already see our audience like taking notes of just like a sneak peek of the amazing strategy that you bring. So thank you for sharing that. How do you ensure that those programs we were talking about are aligned with company priorities and long-term goals and KPIs? And what are the first things that you assess when you're building that roadmap? Because you mentioned that you don't even think about these events like a month or 6 months, even a year. So how do you build that like long-term strategy?
Perfect. So I think it is incredibly important when you're looking at building strategy, especially many years in advance, again, to have that experiential leader in seat in an in-house brand, if at all possible. I think a commitment to having a deep understanding of what your organization is doing and not only what they're doing right now, but what are the expectations of the people within your organization that are attending these programs going to be in 3 years and 5 years and 10 years? And how can experiential impact that? So When I was at Chipotle, it was the lucky part of having so many responsibilities on top of the events was I was tapped into a lot of other areas of the business. I was tapped into a lot of other teams. And so I could see what were the opportunities and how might we be able to solve those on an event scale to help create additional ROI for the organization. So if you're running into challenges with non-slip shoes, not being compliant on wearing non-slip shoes, could we give non-slip shoes in the swag bag at a program to ensure that all 5,000 people that were at that event now have the shoes to be compliant? And so, just kind of always having a problem solver hat on as you're planning is super important. And then again, ensuring that you are not looking too close in front of your windshield. Things will change. That's the challenge with, a 3, 5, 10-year roadmap and runway for some of these things is you can have best laid plans that get absolutely shot. COVID, a great example. When you have to change all of the policies, now are we teaching those new policies to people? Not even to mention all of the pivots that happen inevitably related to COVID with moving then to a hybrid or, all virtual programs. But really being able to turn on a dime if you have to and building a situation within your event and with teams that you trust to be able to make those pivots and be as flexible as possible is only going to create more trust from that C-suite with you in the leadership seat, planning these events.
And then having that North Star, right? So you know where you're going and you know where you're headed. And then of course things are going to pop up. But if you have a clear understanding of where you're going, then you can just pivot, right? Instead of like coming up with new things and new ways. Like you have a proven method and you have buy-in and you have trust and you even have loyalty from your team and support. And then that way you can just follow your North Star. So thank you for sharing that. That's so interesting. So looking back on, you have a ton of experience. Do you have an example of something that went really well or something that didn't go as well that you want to share with us? How you would have approached it differently? It can be large scale, small scale.
Sure. One that comes immediately to mind is in 2024, an event I was planning for 5,000 people. We had hired a big name music performer, and unfortunately, he had a family emergency come up about 36 hours before he was meant to be on stage for us. And it just justified to no end that I love a surprise and delight. I would prefer no one to know what they're getting themselves into because we all know that things change. And as a result of this medical emergency, we had to find a new performer. And so I was so thrilled that not only we were able to find a performer that could make it out to Vegas within 36 hours, but also that there was going to be no disappointment because we as an event team had kept the lid on who that performer was meant to be. So just having contingency plans for contingency plans and having incredibly trusted partners. We had a talent person on our team for that program, and she was really able to pivot and make a significant impact there in a very short period of time. And so that was one where it went bad, but then it ended up being just fine.
That's amazing. And of course, having the bandwidth to even pivot and having last minute changes is always, a little nerve-wracking, but I'm glad
to be
that
sure. There were a couple hours there I was worried about. I was pretty worried. We took 10 minutes to ourselves and then pulled it together and got moving on the solution.
A breathing exercise.
Yeah, exactly. A brief meditation.
So you helped design and deliver Starbucks' flagship leadership experience. What was the core vision behind that project? I've seen the pictures. It looks amazing. Please tell us more about it.
Yeah, of course. Yes, it was very exciting to be working with Starbucks. And, the most exciting thing was leadership experience hadn't happened in 6 years. And so the team hadn't been together in quite a long time. They'd just gone through a significant change to their leadership team, including a new CEO, and much of that team had turned over. And so sort of the primary reason for getting everyone together was it had been so long there was this new executive team, and we really wanted everyone to get recalibrated on what the future strategy of Starbucks was going to be moving forward. And so we're able to execute a 15,000 person program, just shy of 15,000, with an incredibly short runway. It was a wildly impactful moment for the brand. So I was proud to be a part of it.
Absolutely. And just the execution of that, I've seen everything from the production value to just, when you see those smiles in the pictures, you're like, oh, this was a good event.
Yes, I must say, I have never seen brand love like Starbucks coffee house leaders love their brand. And so that was amazing to be a part of. I think, like I said, also executing on such a short runway was such a win for the brand. And, really my only con of the program at all was that it was a bit square peg round hole given the quick turn. And so being able to, you have to inevitably make some concessions when you're limited in time in the way that Starbucks was. And so, obviously Vegas at 115 degrees is not ideal for moving people and things like that. But if that was the worst of it, it was incredibly successful.
I love that. And then, you're tapping into a little something that I love talking about. How do you best support your team going through projects like this? Like, what would you say is a recommendation or a tip you can share with us?
Well, primarily, I would say don't plan things on a really short runway. But if you are forced to, I would say just going into it, knowing who you're supporting and who you're doing it for. Again, I came up providing event experiences to operators, and there is something extra special about doing for the people that do for others, creating a hospitable, incredible environment for people that don't get given for or provided for a lot. They're the ones out there creating hospitality and that those spaces for customers. And so really being able to give that back. And if you keep that in the forefront of your mind, it makes the long nights and the challenging sort of puzzle of trying to figure out how to make it all work in such a short time frame all worth it.
So working with purpose, right? I
100%,
agree with that.
100%. Yeah.
And on a more personal basis or on a more personal level, events take up so much creativity, but also so much hard work and physical endurance. How do you manage that balance with work and staying healthy and happy?
Oh my gosh. Well, I could probably talk for a full hour about that, but sleep, being sure that you still get sleep, being sure that you stay hydrated, like those sorts of things, they seem so obvious, and it's the first thing to go when you're on site or when you're in a really stressful planning period. I think that those things are super important, and again, trying to enjoy your experiences that you've created. I do my very best to, especially at like the evening events, if I'm able to take 30 minutes to be an attendee, I do that because you want to experience what you built to juice you up to do it again. Because if you're just, standing in the corner with a clipboard with eyes wide and getting inundated with text messages about things for the next day, it makes it harder to then create those experiences down the road. So be an attendee at your own events, try and put that hat on, even if for a brief moment. Enjoy the concert that you built for a year, listen to your favorite song, and then move on and get back to work. But that's probably my best advice.
I love that. I don't know if you heard that meme of like, I'm sorry to report that if you actually eat well and you drink water and you go to sleep early, you actually will feel good. I love that.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, I've been a mess at my own events, and I've managed myself well at my own events, and it's always better when you're taking good care of yourself, because you can't take care of others if you're falling apart.
And also what you said about being an attendee in your own event, I get to do that because I'm on the partnership side and I don't necessarily do the production side, and I go to our events and I always stand by the door because I love, like, there's nothing that gives me more like energy than going into one of our events and seeing people walk through the door and go, wow, like that's just like pure, like I get a high of that. So
It's so
I
fun.
absolutely
Yeah, I
agree with you. So now for more of on like a leadership role, what would you suggest upcoming leaders to do to expand maybe internal or creating partnerships with agencies and consulting agencies, what qualities or capabilities should they prioritize when increasing that bandwidth?
I would say connectedness and ability to actually build relationships is very important. That's something I definitely look for when I'm evaluating folks. I also think a desire to learn about the brand, learn not just the industry. I think there are oftentimes we get too insulary about, we're just focused on production. Like, well, but production for whom and to learn what. So if you don't have a firm understanding of what the brand is trying to depict, it's going to be difficult for you to produce that program. So super important there. I would say unflappable in the face of stress and inevitable change that happens on site. Being able to manage that really well and with grace is very important to me when looking at a team. Proactivity. Do you see a problem and sweep it under the rug, or do you get to the root of it and solve it for future state? Massively important. Having a marketing background myself, I am also really drawn to folks with an eye for design, but a mind for logistics. So being able to really kind of have that duality of left brain, right brain is important for me. I'm super logistics minded, but came up in marketing, like I said. And so knowing what looks good and feels good is great, but can it be executed well? And being able to find the combination of those two things. And then probably, like we've talked a lot about, an executive presence, being able to create relationships with people maybe significantly above you in an organization and develop that level of trust with them. That has been probably the reason I've been the most successful in this industry and at this role. So having a strong executive presence is another one. And, I could probably keep listing things for days, but I would say too, exceptional judgment. When you're looking at a team, how are you making decisions? Are you comfortable making them without someone supporting you, especially on site? Like being able to really distill down the issue and solve it both in the moment and then future state. I think, yeah, exceptional judgment right up there at the top.
Being assertive, right? Just being assertive and being direct and being honest. I love everything you said, and I 100% agree with you.
One more thing before we move on. I think it's so important, especially this industry, while vast, is incredibly connected to relationships. And so really operating, I always told my team, when we check out of a hotel after we've done a conference, if I gave a survey to that hotel asking how it was to work with this events team, my expectation is we get a glowing review every time. Really operating with that sort of level of respect for everyone from the catering staff and the hotel team and housekeeping and all of that is so important and often overlooked. Sadly, we get into our own worlds about what's most important to us and we forget to be humans working with humans with respect, and I hope to never lose sight of that.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that because I feel like that's something that really sets the culture aside in some brands or some teams, and I agree with that. To close out, I wanted to ask you, I've been asking everyone this because we're working on our State of Experiential report. I'll send it to you when it's ready, but what do you think is the biggest or some of the biggest trends or what is coming up in experiential marketing today that you think brands should really pay attention to?
For sure. Well, I think there's a lot of things moving. I think we're just now on the up and up out of COVID, to be honest, as an industry at large. And so I'm excited that we're moving into exciting trends and not just dealing with the detriment of COVID and trying to manage budgets and all those sorts of things, which inevitably will always be a challenge, being asked to do so much more with so much less year after year. But trends today, I'm seeing a lot more sort of smaller, more curated events and programs. Everybody loves exclusivity. So how can you incorporate exclusivity even into larger programs? Are there code words for people who are top performers and things like that? Having fun with those things is always a great opportunity. I think really focusing, something that I've been really focused on, and I think the industry is taking a look at this as well, is your event should be a journey, not a schedule, not an agenda. right? So what does your attendee journey look like, and not just what is the attendee schedule? And when you change even just that vernacular, you inevitably find yourself creating an experience from start to finish, rather than just sort of checking the box of, did I attend this meeting? Check. Did I go to the general session? Check. Well, that gets very boring. And so how do you tie in the creative elements of the program with the required elements of the, for the content and all those sorts of things? So again, journey, not a schedule. And then we've talked a lot about it today, but getting more strategic about your ROI. It's your responsibility. Be sure that you're engaging post-program. How is your program having a tail? It should extend. It should not be a 3-day program that costs a lot of money to your organization and then die on the vine. How are you incorporating things that tie back and consistent reminders for your attendees as they move forward? Other industry trends, obviously, sustainability has been huge for quite some time, but I think we're seeing more of a pivot now into authentic sustainability. We hear greenwashing all the time when it comes to other things, but when you talk about events, authentic sustainability should be coming from locations you're sourcing. What cities do a nice job, when it comes to sustainability? How are you sourcing? Are your vendors aligned with that? And so taking a look at it more holistically instead of like, we recycled our flatware is super important. And probably what I'm most excited about when we talk about industry trends is really creating more strategic partnerships as opposed to mile-long lists of vendors. Are there organizations that just align with what you're hoping to do? Of course, RFPs are still important on a reasonable cadence and all those sorts of things, but how are you really finding the people and the companies that you want to link arms and do business with that are propelling your experiential strategy forward instead of hindering it or creating additional challenge? And then, of course, AI. No conversation goes without AI anymore, I feel like, but the way that I've liked to look at how I can evaluate that future state is very much around mundane tasks, which then allow for that creativity, the human creativity, to really flourish because they aren't being inundated with this sort of mundane tasks that now we can leverage AI to deal with. So creating very specific, specialized, personalized attendee agendas and things like that. Let's move that into AI and allow for our creative teams to do what they're best at in creating exceptional creative experiences.
So thank you so much for joining me today. You have such a strategic mind and you are so innovative, and I can feel even from the screen, we haven't met in person, but I hope we do very soon, just your energy and how creative you are. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And then to everyone else listening, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow, like, and share. We will put all of our resources we listed below on the show notes. And until next time, keep creating real moments of impact. Bye.
Thank you for listening. Tune in next time on Event Up.